Welcome back, folks. Sheepdog Smokey here. You can hear my voice is finally, I would say, back to normal. I pretty much hear the little rattles and such all the time. It's just become a part of life for me. But as I'm now past the absolute worst of allergy season, getting into that lull before winter allergies hit, but hit alone, I wanted to go on and try and get a few videos recorded so I have a buffer for if I have a few days where I'm down. So we're going to get back into U.S. history here. Now, for those of you who have been watching the series, you'll realize last time we left off pretty much on the eve of war. The colonists had been pushed to their limits. We'd had the Stamp Act. We'd had British rule just growing and growing and growing until it just got too much for them, and we had the Boston Tea Party. Tea is still, and it was at the time, a very large part of an Englishman's daily diet. I'm only roughly half English, Irish, Scots, Welsh. I can't drink coffee to save my life. If I didn't have my Earl Grey tea sitting behind that box, I would be totally dependent on soft drinks for caffeine, which I know are bad for me. So this is basically, imagine the average American being told by the U.S. government, we're going to tax coffee at 3% higher than everything else. Because Americans buy so much coffee, we need your money, so we're just going to put a tax on something you honestly say you can't live without. Your reaction today would probably be a lot stronger, but the colonists decided, well, we'll do without our tea. So, on top of this monumental decision to do without tea, a group of colonists disguised themselves, and most reports are they disguised themselves as natives to the area, not as colonists, or even as British troops, boarded the ships and threw the tea into the harbor. Now, of course, 240-odd years later, this has given us the great meme of how British make tea, and it shows the electric kettle, how Americans make tea, and it shows someone throwing a tea bag into a body of water. But this was very much an economic attack on the British. The East India Trading Company was the life's blood of the British economy. It was the biggest exporter and biggest shipping company on the planet. Imagine something akin to Amazon today, or FedEx or UPS, if they also were the sole provider of one certain product that everybody wanted. The East India Trading Company not only brought tea to the British Isles, but it also brought spices and silks from the East, something that the very wealthy in Britain definitely wanted to keep going. But in order to pay for it, they had to have money. And they were much happier taking money from colonists than they were from their own pockets. So, of course, taxes on the colonies were never even coughed at in Parliament. Now, of course, like any good government, bureaucracy, anyone bucking the system is to be punished. The intolerable acts were Britain's attempt to reign in the colonies. It removed local governance, self-governance. Basically said, okay, you can't run your own colony, we're going to do it. It expanded the province of Quebec into the Ohio area, and it expanded royal rule. It also would result in higher taxes. Basically, they're saying you won't pay your taxes, we'll tax you more. Sound familiar? There's a building in Washington, D.C. that, regardless of your politics, every person who is not a government employee or billionaire with accountants absolutely despises. But in response to this, we had the First Continental Congress held on April 1775. No, I'm sorry, September of 1774. This was to oppose or negotiate with the British. Okay? The Congress was not there specifically to declare independence. Very akin to Abraham Lincoln in the 1860s, when he said if he could end the war without ending slavery, he would. These are people who understand that you can't get everything you want. So the First Continental Congress in 1774 was there to basically find any way possible to move forward that was beneficial to the colonies. Now, of course, we all know how King George and Parliament reacted. Being able to look through the lens of history, we know. But at the time, the goal was simply whatever it took to get life back on track for the colonies. Unfortunately, as we know through the lens of history, it didn't work. And we moved to Lexington and Concord. Now, at the time, this is just about 6, 7, 8 months later, April of 1775, the British had been building up their power base, basically. The colonists knew it was coming. So you had William Dawes and Paul Revere that developed a signal from the Old North Church in Boston. And very famously, one if by land, two if by sea. And on that fateful night, they saw 2 lanterns. And Dawes and Revere, very intelligent men, decided that they both could not go the same route to let the people in Lexington know what was going on. So Dawes went by land, while Revere rode across the river and went by land after that. So they basically flanked, so that if one was stopped, the other had a chance. They notified the local militia, the Minutemen, who, very aptly named, they could be ready in 1 minute. So they grabbed their arms and they were in Lexington Square when the Redcoats got there. We've all heard the rhyme, "Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere." Unfortunately, the very foggy and scratched lens of history has told us that Revere rode through the city shouting, "The British are coming." That would be if it was today. At the time, the colonies were British. They were British subjects, British citizens, British, basically, peasants. So Revere would have rode through shouting, "The regulars are coming," meaning the regular army. Now, in addition to hearing the regulars are coming, notifying the Minutemen that they needed to be ready to face the British army, it would have also let anyone who was not in the militia know, you need to seek shelter, get to safety. Now, of course, buildings at the time, they would have retreated into their cellars and basements. But when the British Army got to the Lexington town square, they were faced by the Minutemen. It was 700 British regulars facing a much smaller force of colonial Minutemen. Both sides had been ordered not to fire. The British were there delivering their orders of surrender your firearms. As we all know, mimicking Leonidas of Sparta at Thermopylae, they told him come and take them. Now the British didn't immediately advance, but they held firm, and we don't know who pulled that trigger. But a very short time later, 8 Minutemen were dead, and the British Army was marching on Concord. It was a shot heard round the world. It sparked the American Revolution. And very famously, it would revolutionize warfare. What the British Army did not expect was that as they were marching out of Concord at the North Bridge, they would be faced with hundreds of, probably not hundreds, but a much larger force of Minutemen. You see, the Minutemen in Lexington were those who lived in Lexington, but Dawes and Revere's message would have begun being passed beyond Lexington. So at the North Bridge outside of Concord, the British lost 200 troops and retreated. Very simply, their bright red coats made perfect targets. And this would lead to the Second Continental Congress, which is where we'll pick up next time. But I do want to discuss what I mean by it would change warfare. We all know the basic rules today. For those of you who have watched any part of the mainstream media for the last 30 years, from Operation Desert Storm to Operation Enduring Freedom today, you'll know basically what happens in modern militaries. They camouflage themselves. There are smaller units that employ flanking techniques, close quarters battles, room clearing, snipers who fire from a mile away in some situations. But that's not how warfare worked in the 1770s. We can go back as far as Leonidas at Thermopylae, and you would have seen large-scale battles where both sides lined up everyone they had, and whoever lost everyone they had first was the loser. And the British were very good at this because they had the largest military on the planet at the time. What they didn't expect, though, were colonists who had been faced by adversaries who fought very differently. You see, the Native Americans didn't fight like that. They would fight for the trees and shadows. They would have scouts and lone fighters who would basically snipe the enemy from a distance to sow indecision and fear into the enemy forces. Very famously, the movie The Patriot shows this. It shows that you did have the colonial forces that would line up against the British, but you had the guerrilla warfare also being employed. General Cornwallis didn't know how to deal with this. That's really kind of where this began, because prior to Revere and Dawes, you would have had a single rider with an official dispatch from the ultimate commander who would have mustered official troops. There would have been an agreed-upon date where they met on the field of battle. Both sides would take turns firing until one side was completely wiped out. The officers who were well away from battle would meet in the middle, and the one who lost all their troops would surrender. This new world taught the colonists a new way of waging war. The natives didn't care who were officers and who were not. They targeted anyone and everyone they could. The colonists took that up. In that movie, The Patriot, Cornwallis can be seen in his very, very lavish accommodations taken from a colonist, telling Gibson's character that we must remain gentlemen and not target the officers. And we all know what happened after that, because it did not change how the Americans did battle. The reason that the British felt you don't target officers is only the officers were given any amount of training in leadership. The troops, they were taught obey orders, nothing more. They knew how to fire their weapon, they knew how to attack with a blade, and they knew how to follow orders until they died. But the colonial forces were different. If the man leading the charge who was giving the order fell, someone would take up that banner and yell, "Follow me," and they would become the new leader. This is why the U.S. military has grown to become the preeminent military on the planet. Everyone, from a four-star general to a slick-sleeve private, is taught if you have to take control to win and keep the men safe, do it. There is a chain of command, not this person is in command. The chain of command would be from a master sergeant down the line on the battlefield, maybe a lieutenant above them or a captain above them. the chain of command then says, if the person ahead of me is unable to give orders, I give them. All the way down to, if you get down to the grunts, who are the ones carrying that M16, and they were there taking orders, and no one is there to give orders, someone in that unit will give the order, we're going to take that hill. We're going to take this building. We have to, or more people will die. The British didn't know how to deal with this. The scene in that movie is very accurate because Cornwallis did not know how to deal with an adversary who didn't abide by the gentlemanly rules of warfare. As Patton very clearly said, war is hell. There are no rules in war. It is not a clean, stylized battle where the gentlemen are in the rear. REMFs, look it up. And they simply give the orders to the plebs. March out there, and whichever side completely loses all of you first, loses. No, what the colonists realized is they could take out the leadership, and the rank-and-file soldiers would fold. And they wouldn't have to kill hundreds upon thousands of men. If they could get the command to fall and buckle, that's all they had to do, because the men did not know what to do when no one was giving them orders. I was a firefighter for several years, and that even was the way it worked with us. I never advanced beyond basically the rank of firefighter. I never made sergeant or lieutenant or captain. Never really cared to. I was happy doing what I was doing. But I knew if the lieutenant fell, the sergeant would begin giving orders. If the sergeant fell, someone would have to step up and start giving orders. Very regularly, we would hear about situations where there's no sergeant or lieutenant in the building, but you hear over the radio, break those windows, ventilate this building, or we need more water. And the lieutenants and captains and sergeants on the truck would just start turning dials. And they would know, this person is in the fight. We're here to support them. That is the mindset the British could not deal with. That's the mindset that won us the Revolutionary War. I've talked long enough on this. Let me know what you think. We're going to pick up next time with the Second Continental Congress, and we're going to move on from there. Probably 1 to 2 more videos on this era before we move into the actual United States post-Revolutionary War. We are an oddity on this planet. We are a country that fought a foreign power to gain our independence from that power. That is not the norm on this planet. We're not the only one. I know. It has happened before. Probably will happen again. We're definitely not in the minority of countries that have seen warfare break out within their country. But countries who are granted independence because a treaty runs out, such as Hong Kong, when the British pulled out and China decided, oh, it's ours now. Independence is not something they value the same way as a country who fought, bled, and died for it. My ancestors were here. They would have fought and fallen for this country. They fought and fell for the North in the Civil War. They fought in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and since. There's a difference in being granted something and having earned something. We've earned it. The only thing I will say is, be civil. Yes, you have the right to say what you want. Very famously enshrined in the First Amendment of the Constitution. But that does not mean you have the right to say anything you want without any possibility of repercussions. Be civil. Otherwise, you shall reap what you sow. We are here to discuss, dissent, and debate as logical, civil, thinking adults. And we can do that. That's where we learn the most, is when we are disagreed with. So please remember that. Also, please remember to like and share the video. That helps with the algorithm and to widen the conversation. I am still doing the giveaway at 500 subscribers for a choice of one book, at 1,000 for a choice of two, and at 1,500 for all three. The choices are Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World, and 1984. That won't be the last, but I have to get there before I can plan for the next level. And you'll want to be subscribed to be part of that. Make sure also to turn on the notifications. These videos launch every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Unfortunately, I live in North Texas and suffer horrific allergies all through the summer, as you have seen with the hiatus. But hopefully we're back, and I can build up a stockpile of videos, hopefully recording 2 to 3 per week, where if I need to take 2 to 3 weeks off, there will still be videos. That is the goal, and that is what I'm working toward. Until next time, everyone have a wonderful day.